Hello, everyone, and welcome. As you get logged in, you will see a survey on your screen. If you could take a second to fill that out, that would be great. You can also drop into the chat where you're calling in from today. We will get started with the presentation in just a few minutes. As we wait, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Madison Burnett. I'm a BCBA. I lead our professional development program, and I'll be supporting throughout the webinar today. In addition to that role, I work alongside other BCBAs on our clinician-led recruitment team, and I support in the effort of recruiting quality professionals to join our team. If you are interested in joining us, please indicate so in the post-webinar survey at the end of this webinar, or you can email at careers@manhattanpsychologygroup.com. Okay, I'm going to leave this survey open for just a little bit longer so we can have a few more people answer it. I do see we have a lot of recurring attendees, also a lot of new people though. Before we begin, I would like to tell you all a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. We were established in 2011, and we've continued to grow our team consisting of skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, licensed social workers, and behavior interventionists. As a team, we are committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side and Long Island City offices, in home, school, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages and in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals where we will continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. Our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary, integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. Next is some housekeeping information about CEUs. For those of you seeking CEUs for this presentation, you will need to collect the code word stated and complete the post-webinar quiz and survey. We will post the codes on the screen and verbally say them, and once we move on, we will not be able to come back. We will send out the post-webinar quiz in the last 10 minutes of the presentation for you to get your CEU. As of January 1st, we have started charging a nominal fee for the continuing education certificates. This webinar fee is still free to attend, but will be at $2.50 to obtain a CEU certificate. Any polls during this presentation are not required, but they are encouraged. We will be leaving the chat open, but please post any questions you have in the Q&A so we can make sure that they are seen. And now I would love to introduce our speaker. Braxton is a speech-language pathologist, board-certified behavior analyst, and a coach. In addition to those credentials, he has pursued additional education in psychology, academic instruction, sensory-motor integration, and effective implementation methodologies, and is currently pursuing his doctorate of business administration in industrial and organizational psychology. He has provided services from the Virgin Islands to Hawaii, New York to Mexico, and in Africa and Asia. Braxton specializes in several severe and multiple disabilities and assistive technology and cognitive linguistic functioning across the lifespan. He has served as the executive director of a K-12 school of special education, adult daily living program, and employment program, he is also the CEO of an ABA company providing services and individuals with autism. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Braxton.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited about this presentation. This is one of my favorite topics, one of many favorite topics, but this is certainly one of them. The topic of this one is design your AAC philosophy. And whenever we're talking about AAC and we're talking about it in different ways, I tend to get a few different types of people. They're coming to my presentations or they're asking me questions. They're either they're having a conflict or disagreement with another professional, another person about how to do AAC, or they have some like very basic information because they've downloaded an app and they know what it is, or they've done picture exchange in some way, shape, or form. That they know that it's important. They're like, I believe that's important. It's something that I need to do, and it's something that I know can help my kid, whether I'm the parent or I'm the professional. I know I can help them grow, and there's more in there that we can get to. But they just don't know what it is. Or I have some people that are like, what's this AAC thing? Like, I know I've heard it before. I've seen it on a parent group, or a friend of mine's kid has it. And so they just want to know what that is. So first I want to kind of get an idea from you. Who are you? Like, what's your role? Are you a parent? Are you a professional? And then where are you at? What's bringing you here? Why are you here today? So give me a few minutes to pop that in the chat. Okay. Professional. Okay. BCBA. And what's bringing you here? Why are you here? What is it? Are you like, I'm having troubles. Me and the speech therapists aren't getting along, or I'm a parent, I'm trying to figure this out. More and more kids needing AAC. Hear that a lot. Many clients with AAC devices, having nonverbal kids utilizing AAC. I'm a BCBA and a mom, 3 boys with autism. Wow. So you're going to have all sorts of these situations. So I've seen a lot of professionals and some parents in here. So a lot of the things you're going to see a lot are some of it is going, they don't have anything and we need to get them something, right? We know that they're going to be doing something. Other situations are they have something, but we're hitting a wall. We're not seeing progress. We're not getting to where we think we could or we should, but there's more in there. I hear that a lot. There's more in there. We're just not getting to it. And I want you all to know in advance that those are two different situations. While we're going to create a kind of a general framework and overall structure that we're going to operate off of, again, the AAC philosophy, knowing that if you're going through and fixing, right, you're having to redo or kind of get below those roots of some places and fill in holes that are missing, that's a different plan and prioritization than if you're starting from scratch and starting at the beginning. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different pieces. We're going to give you some general frameworks and knowledge, but also know that that's a different situation. And within those two situations, if there's behavioral considerations, that's going to, again, take priority and going to shift the way you talk about things and what you prioritize, what verbiage we use and what modality we use, because we're having some severe behaviors. We got to take care of those pieces first sometimes, a lot of times with communication, but that's going to prioritize the communication we use or what communication way we're going to use it. So know that overall through all of this, those are 3 overall basic differences are starting from scratch, got nothing, that we have some AAC background, but we've kind of got to clean it up. Then if we have some significant problem behaviors that are going to take some priority, those are all be considered as we go through this. The fourth one, I think we'll cover a little bit later, but is around, is there social motivation? And so that goes into a lot of different things. Is there already social motivation, or is it they're just requesting and communicating for their own wants and needs that don't have to do with a social desire or social interaction? So when talking about AAC, it can be likened to, honestly, it could almost be likened to trying to talk about religion or trying to talk about politics, because so often we have these like large camps. There are these beliefs that people that like feel really strongly about one thing or the other. And we're going to talk about a few of those as we go. I mean, you may have already heard of some of them. Like we talk about core vocabulary versus fringe vocabulary, right? There are people to be very staunchly in one of those or the other, right? There are things that are like whether or not you use motor planning or whether it's all picture based, whether there are prerequisites or not prerequisites to AAC, et cetera. These are some beliefs. These are things that do not have research that says one is correct and the other one isn't correct. All in all, and all things considered, AAC is actually a fairly new field. It's a new realm of, at least for research. There may have been some things that were done haphazardly to get through. As far as being researched, it has only been within the last, you know, 50 years max, but definitely much less than that when we talk about advanced and more high technology AAC. So there isn't a lot out there, and some of it can be conflicting. Another part of the reason that's conflicting is because who they're researching changes vastly, right? AAC for my individuals who have ALS when I'm working with them, or AAC when I'm working with my people who've had stroke, or AAC versus my child with Angelman's who's super social but just doesn't really have the vocal piece of it, versus my child with autism who doesn't care if you are even in the room or exist throughout the day, right? Those are all drastically different profiles, and some of my other presentations are on AAC profiles and what those can look like. But how you approach that, how you prioritize them, and the different ways we're going to look at that are going to be different. And unfortunately, the research that's out there tends to be lumped into AAC. Read the stuff about AAC. Well, you should do all this. Well, yeah, that makes sense for my child with cerebral palsy. doesn't make sense for my child with autism, right? And so as we're looking at those pieces, know that those on themselves are differentiations. A lot of what we're going to talk about when we talk about designing an AAC philosophy is going, when you don't have the same beliefs, you don't have the same general assumptions about how language develops, how children develop, how communication should occur or does occur, it's going to be really hard to have a conversation with somebody else. So when we're talking about those people who are having a difficulty with other people or having these conversations, or whether it be with identifying the research that is appropriate and that fits with them, right? And what research is good here, being able to look at the assumptions that they're making about how AAC, language development modalities operate, is going to play a big part in knowing, oh, this doesn't match with my philosophy, right? It also is going to make a huge difference. We talk about theoretical underpinnings and philosophy. That's how we make so many of our decisions, because we believe, if you're in the world of ABA, right? We believe that this is how this works because it's been researched and shown. And so that's how we decide, well, what's going to be the next choice or the best choice or one of the options at least that we were able to do. So if we don't have that also for AAC, it's also going to be really difficult for us to make some of those decisions and be able to move forward in those pieces. So when we go through this today, we're going to go through a bunch of different areas that I have found, these like my nuggets of information. If I had to boil it down, going in all of these different areas and all of these different components, these are things that we have to have an idea about, have an opinion about, and have a belief about, because that's going to drastically change how we move forward. It's going to drastically change what research we know applies to our learner or doesn't apply to our learner. And it drastically changes how we're going to have this conversation with somebody else. If we're disagreeing, we're going to, oh, there's probably a fundamental philosophy here that we don't agree on. And that's why we're not coming to the same conclusion. So put a yes in the chat if that makes sense and you understand why we're talking about AAC philosophy versus technology and just all the pieces. Does that make sense? I don't feel like I'm selling you on it, but it's the truth. Like, you have to have an idea. There is no black and white. The research doesn't say do this, don't do this. Otherwise, I would just do that and you would all just read that. So we have to come up with our own beliefs and philosophies. I'll give you some information about different aspects, what mine are, and then you have to decide for yourself whether you believe that or you don't. You have to look up for them that information, but I at least want to get you headed in the right direction with these key areas and key information. I will tell you what I've heard in feedback after giving people this presentation is that, one, they're like, oh, this actually makes it more complicated to a certain extent. Like, I didn't even know, which is why if you've seen some of my social media posts on LinkedIn or Facebook, it's the things you didn't know you didn't know. And this is for speech therapists as just as much as it is for special education teachers, as much as it is for BCBAs. They're things that people just aren't talking about, unfortunately. And that's why I am so passionate about this. So in some ways, I'll be like, oh, there's so much more for me to think about. And also, it's going to be ways that probably going to walk away from this thinking about and knowing about things that other people who have maybe done AAC for a long time don't even talk about and don't even know. And it blows my mind that it isn't a bigger part of the conversation. But again, that's why we're here today. So I apologize in advance if knowledge can sometimes be a frustrating thing as well, right? So let's dig into it. You ready? Yes, yes. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is prerequisites for AAC. This is a common one that you either believe this or you don't believe this. Some people say there are no prerequisites for AAC. Other people say, but there's fundamental skills. You got to do this, right? You have to be able to do this. Here's the truth. There are no prerequisites for AAC. There is no prerequisite for speech. I don't say at this little, 9-month-old, 1-year-old saying, you're not doing these things yet, so I'm not going to bother teaching you speech yet. Like, it's just not going to happen. No, right? We do it from the get-go. And the reason why, again, this is so confusing for people, is that the reason why there's no prerequisite for speech is because the act of speaking and practicing speaking and playing with speaking is what teaches you the skills you need to learn how to speak. Same thing for language. The act of using language and practicing language is what teaches you the things you need to develop more language. The same is true for AAC. The act of practicing, doing, prompting, cueing those pieces to get you to use the AAC device or system, whatever it happens to be. That's what develops AAC usage and the skill sets that it needs. So, are there skills that absolutely make you the use of AAC faster, more efficient? You're better able to dive into, find more pieces, be more independent with it. 100% there is. There absolutely is. Can you develop those through practicing and using AAC? Yes, yes, you can. I get this one a lot. People are like, well, how long should I wait, before I give up on speech? And I'm like, well, one, why are you giving up? And two, how long did you wait to start speech? You didn't, did you? Because the question isn't about speech, it's how long do we wait to work on communication? That's really what we're talking about here. AAC is just communication. So as we're talking through this, you'll go, yes, there are prerequisite skills to learning AAC, or to be more to be not to learn it, to be more fluent at it, I should say. And we can talk all about that. That's a whole other thing we can dive into. But there's no reason not to start AAC, because you can learn it as you're doing it, just like you would for speech or language. Now, to talk more about that, we got to talk about what is AAC? What is it even to begin with? Well, AAC, by definition, is anything that replaces vocal symbolic communication. Now, there are some problems with that. That's very kind of ableist, honestly, is saying that, oh, well, if I don't speak, then I'm not equal, right? And so especially within the deaf and hard of hearing community, that's, could be really problematic. But at this point in time, anything that is not vocal speech would be considered alternative augmentative communication. So if you needed to use sign language, technically that's AAC, right? It's a different version than speaking. Now, with that being said, so is texting, so is email. It's all alternative and augmentative communication. It can fit within all those different pieces that isn't vocal communication. Now, I do believe that definition has broadened a lot recently, and so I want to give that caveat. But overall, that's what we're talking about. And we want to keep that in mind whenever we're talking about what is AAC, and whenever we talk about the kids who quote unquote use AAC, because if anything, if you've heard from my previous conversations, these kids aren't that different from us. It may look different, we may think it's different, we may want it to be different, but they're not. We use alternative augmentative communication all the time. A lot of things that we do, they do. It's just they may do it more. It may be the only option they have, or we have other options, but we're not that different. So that is what AAC is. It is this using a different form of communication, but it's still communication. And that's when I say there are no prerequisites. It's because the question is, are they ready to start learning to communicate? That's the question. And I challenge anyone to tell me no. Please message me directly. I would love to have a discussion with somebody who says that somebody is not ready to start learning communication. May it be difficult, may it be really rudimentary. Yes, but there's nothing that says they're not ready. And the research that is out there, some people say, well, if they're using AAC, then their speech will decrease. Actually, the research says it's kind of a mixed bag. You don't know. Sometimes kids start using AAC and their speech will decrease. Sometimes kids start using AAC and their speech skyrockets. I'll say anecdotally from my experience, it depends on what the kid needs. If the kid needs, if the use of speech is so laborious for them, it takes so much, cognitive energy, whatever you want to use, it may take so much out of them. And they're like, oh, using the device is so much easier for me. I can actually get more out. Then why not let them do that? Right? I know for myself, you can ask my partner this anyway, is there are times when I don't have the speech. I don't want to talk. I don't have it in me. I might text you because I can really speak, just send you that message and yeah, I'm done. Right. And I know we've heard from specifically autistic voices saying, there's some days that I need my AAC instead. I don't have the energy. It's too much to navigate or to be just the social interaction of the communication, vocal communication. It's so much easier for me to do this. Again, anecdotally from my own personal work is that I have seen kids that I just last week, I had parents and a team that I consult with reach out to me. They're like, he's not using his speech. We started with, he had no speech. They kept pushing speech for so long. We did picture exchange to get it started. We transitioned to a device, and that he just skyrocketed into a whole bunch of speech. But I was like, do not take his device away. And they keep putting out words on his device, and now he like his speech is dropping, and his AAC use is skyrocketing. Right? They're like, oh no, he's regressing. So we talked about, well, what is he saying? He's saying things on the device he's never said vocally. He's making combinations of language that he's never done vocally, because here's a more physical of place that he can understand it easier, right? And now I was like, just give it some time. This isn't a regression. This is a change, an evolution. And he needs this form that helped him do it to begin with to come back and let him do it. And sure enough, I got a text this morning that, here it is a week later, and he's starting to mimic his device in vocal. And so he's starting to say those vocal pieces out loud. He just says them now because, oh, I used this to figure out the language piece because it's too hard to figure out. It's way easier to talk, at least when it's in the moment anyway, if I've got the language. So just showing that this is a kid who is super vocal, and they're like, oh great, we've won. I'm like, we have not won. We're not done yet. So this ebb and flow could also possibly happen as they evolve and as they're moving forward. So then when we look at, what is communication? What is AAC? Anything that isn't speech, or even speech, I guess I should say, is that these words that we use are symbols for the thing, right? Other than an onomatopoeia, like the word splat, which sounds, it comes out the way that it sounds, it has some relation, or meow or a moo. Those are the only things about speech that match up and line up to what they actually are. This is why kids call a cow a moo versus like frequently, not all the time. But again, coming from a farm background, even us, we learn what a cow is real early, but it usually starts out of the moo either way, because that makes sense. Who the heck called it a cow? How does that make any sense, right? So that's all a symbol. That is a symbol for the thing. And then we have different varying degrees of transparency or opaqueness going. It matches really well. Like if I did the symbol, the sign for drink, that's what we call transparent. Like it's pretty clear what that is. But if I was giving you the sign for girl, it comes from the fact that girls used to wear a bonnet, and so they would tie the string around their neck. That's where that sign comes from. But you're not going to get that probably, right? So there's nothing necessarily about those that make any sense, and that have a lot of that connection. So it's important to remember that when we talk about a sign, or we talk about an AAC symbol, or we talk about a spoken word, that is all topography. That is all what I would call articulation. It's articulation of the mouth, articulation of the hands, articulation of gross motor, grabbing a symbol and giving it. It's articulation is the movement, right? The movement of, or the actions of a thing, because you can articulate a variety of things. That's what it is. Like they talk about, you can articulate your limbs if you're a physical therapist, etc. It's all articulation. It's all topography. That's all it is. And so it's deciding which one is a different form of communication. It's how are we articulating? How are we representing communication, the idea, the message that's underneath that? And I think that's a really powerful shift. It's really going to come into play at some of the other pieces we're going to talk about, and going, oh, it's not AAC. Texting is AAC, right? It's just what's the articulation? The fact that I type this is a different articulation for the word cookie than it is if I write cookie. It's all just a different articulation and some of the other pieces of skills that go into that. Yeah? Yes, in the chat if that makes sense. Yeah? Yes. Great. Good. Beautiful. All right, moving on. So we're going to take a big jump here. Okay, so we have an idea of what AAC is. We've introduced the idea of what symbols are and how that works. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. But I'm going to take you back before that. Symbolic communication is the act of communicating with typically speech. Speech is almost all symbolic. Aside from onomatopoeias, it doesn't make sense. And for the record, if you travel around to different parts of the country or the world, the words, the onomatopoeia, the thing that's said for a different thing is different. Like, and when I lived in the Virgin Islands, their word for, or what sound does a frog make? It was koki. So you ask them, like, oh, what sound, like little kid, what sound what does a frog make? Koki, right? Because that's the sound that the frogs make there. The frogs in US are usually ribbit, right? I asked my spouse who's from Mexico, and I was like, what sound does a frog make? It is not ribbit. doesn't sound like that at all whatsoever. So different countries and different parts of the world are going to have different sounds. So even the most transparent thing that you would think actually isn't universal. So just a little fun nugget of caveat. Look at different animal sounds across the world. It's kind of fun. So we're going before that. What's before symbolic communication? Pre-symbolic communication. And this is one of my, again, my pet peeves and my biggest talking points and the things I love is talking about how the fact is that symbolic communication isn't the first communication that we learn, actually. That comes in, at least expressively, 9, 12 months ish range. We start to get some beginnings of it. And it's even not even technically considered language sometimes because it's not as complex enough. It's just kind of learned this one-to-one correlation. It's manding. I get this result from doing this, saying this thing, right? Now, express or receptively usually comes in a little earlier. That's what we're looking at. But try to tell any parent, and again, I'm not a parent, but I've worked with enough of them, and the ones that I talk to, try to tell them that their kid does not understand them, that their baby doesn't understand them pretty soon for some basic things, or that they aren't communicating some basic things to them well before 9 to 12 months, right? So parents, if you're a parent, was your child able to communicate with you, or you communicate with them before 9 months? Tell me yes otherwise tell me no if I'm way off. Please let me know in the chat. Yes, yes. All right. So I'm still good. So far, I'm at 100%, but I always like to check just to make sure I'm not crazy, right? So, yes, right? They can. Well, how are they doing that? It's not that they just have this language that's in there. We're just waiting for it to pop out. No, it's that there are so many pre-symbolic communication portions that they utilize. Along that line, how many of you ever have gone to a country in which you didn't speak the language? Did you just like freeze up and be like, oh, I guess I'm here until somebody helps me? Can't do nothing. There's no possible way. I mean, before translator apps, obviously, but if you didn't have that, or if your cell phone's dead, there's no cell service, whatever. Can you get by? Can you get your needs and wants met from people who literally don't speak your language? I moved to Mexico for a little while where I did not speak any Spanish at all whatsoever, and my spouse did not speak any English, and we met. And even without the translator app, we still, oh, the app helped. I mean, Google Translate's not great now, but it was really bad back then, so it didn't help a lot. But I still got around. I still got food. I still was able to get basic things met and need and taken care of. I was in Asia a few weeks ago. I don't speak any uh, Thai. I don't speak any Mandarin or any other dialect of Chinese. I still got my things met. I still got my needs met. We went to a restaurant and ate with people that had no idea what I was saying, and I had no idea what they were saying, right? It's all through pre-symbolic communication. The things, it's the gestures, it's the movements, it's the ways of pointing things, it's pantomiming, all these different things that you can do that communicate information that don't have to have a symbol attached to it. And the reason I say both of those examples is because not only is that how we communicate before we start to have vocal communication, we're not that different from everybody else. I still use that now. If I can't speak, if I'm on the phone, I use pre-symbolic communication to communicate to my spouse, like, hey, on the phone, don't mess with me. I need to go. I'm like, I don't like that. You need to go. Or if I'm just mad, I'm like, I need a minute, right? We all use pre-symbolic communication. If you're across a crowded room, we use that. That's how we get things done and figured out. It adds context, it adds information. Again, even in this place where you don't know the language. So, what do you think we used and kids use as they're developing, regardless of how old they are, but in the developmental process, to bridge the gaps between the feeling, the MO, the motivation, the message that I have inside, and the symbolic word that I have? For the rest of us, what do you think we do? We used pre-symbolic communication, right? I would say want, and I would point to the thing that's there that I want, right? Or I would say, or if I was like cookie, right? I knew the word cookie, but I didn't know the word want. I can ask for it, right? Through my gestures. I could say daddy, like daddy, no. I mean, I have the word no, but I'm like daddy, and like put my hands up, stop, right? So there's so many pieces. If we have a kid who like they got one word, they've got a wide variety of one word, but they don't have two words. Well, I would be expecting a one word symbol with another component of pre-symbolic that communicates the other part of that, right? And then once that's going and fluent, I go, oh, now I know what your symbol needs to be. Your next symbol needs to be this pre-symbolic gesture that you're getting and using all the time. So people ask me, well, what word should I pick? What thing should I do? I abhor lists, vocabulary lists, because now there's a certain level which we can learn for the sake of learning. I can teach you words for the sake of knowing those words. But until we get to that point, or sometimes I have kids who know a whole bunch of vocabulary words, but they don't use any of them, right? They've got them all over their device, but they don't use any. It's then going, oh, well, where is that back here? Where is that in all the communication, right? It's where is the MO that's there. So we use it throughout our entire lives. We use it when we can't speak, whenever we can't, like whenever you become dysregulated or you're too emotional, right? Do we talk? Do we become better communicators whenever you're upset? No, we do not become better communicators. We become worse communicators. That's what we become, right? So a lot of people become, that's whenever I'm like, I'm getting so upset and me and my partner are having a issue. Look at this, like, I just can't talk anymore. If we're lucky, we might communicate more, but usually not better quality, right? So this is something that we still use and we still fall back to. And so that's what's important to think about then, is that whenever we have a child who is dysregulated, who's upset, or an adult who's dysregulated, upset, our prefrontal cortex, that part of our brain shuts down and we start retreating farther, farther into the more primitive parts of our brain. We can't communicate. We don't have the ability to communicate. We can't use that symbolic, more complex reasoning. That's why all of us, again, we're not that different. Even us use more primitive forms of communication, including all the way back to pre-symbolic. So if you have a kid who has learned symbolic communication without the AAC or speech, I don't really care, because again, that's all just articulation. If their brain is shutting down where they can't process that, what do they have to resort back to other than all these bad behaviors, aberrant behaviors, and behaviors we don't want? Nothing. They have a fall from symbolic all the way down to aberrant behaviors. That's their next option. So building in pre-symbolic communication, that's what allows them to and builds them into being able to have something else to fall back to. Yeah. So here's your first code word, AAC.
As
Your
people
first
jump
code
at
word.
that, we did have a
Yeah.
question. Is crying for food in infancy pre-symbolic communication?
Ooh, great question. So there's a difference. So there's prelocutionary, elocutionary. There's a few different versions of even of these things we call gestures, right? So there's some that occur as a reaction, right? That are so the crying for food versus the potty dance. There's a potty dance that kids will do because they're like, "Oh, I gotta go, I gotta go." They're not doing that so you can understand information. They're doing that because it's a reaction to their environment. So here's another example that people get confused a lot. A kid reaching for something versus pointing at it. And then it doesn't have to be, you could do the Disney point. Okay, right? It could be their hands like that thing. It doesn't have to be the actual pointer finger. That's not the point of the point. It's going, if I wasn't here, would you have just grabbed it, right? Are you trying to grab it and do it for yourself, regardless of if there's a third person in that triangulation, right? Or are you trying to say that? I need you to know, right? That. I'll look at you. I need you to know that that's the thing that I want. That's a drastically different, right? So these are there that when it comes to crying, that is something that gets shaped into you have like regular old crying, and then there's crying for a bottle versus crying for dirty, and then that can turn into, again, once you kind of have those differentiated cries, typically parents will then start to go, well, now that I know what you want, the specific thing, I haven't just run through a list of things trying. I'm like, oh, that's a bottle cry, right? And I'm saying, Baba, Baba. And I'm telling you, giving this symbol so that way you start to understand it while you're expressing that MO to me. Here it is. And some kids, even before they will be able to say that, they'll point for the bottle, right? Or there's one that's separate. We're going like, if I'm trying to teach kids to respond to WH questions or understand to tell me a location, and we take it and we get rid of it and go, oh, where is it? If I didn't say where is it, I just went, that's a pretty universal symbol for look for it. Where is it? Gotta find it. Or then I'm saying, where's daddy, right? We're saying daddy, and they turn and look. Even if they just turn and look, they don't even have to point. Like I said, where's daddy? They went and found them, right? So there is, even within things that aren't symbolic, There's these things that are just reactive, and there's the things that are actually symbolic communication. For it to be communication, it has to be intended for a recipient. And those are pieces that I can't tell you how many kids don't have that basic skill set. They don't have that underlying piece for them, so they don't have anything to fall back to. All right. Moving on, types of AAC. This is just for kind of your own knowledge. There is high tech, dynamic display screens, iPads. There is low tech, which is things that are like a voice output. You hit a button and it makes a voice, right? So you hit a little thing. It's not a dynamic display of a screen in any form. There is a no tech option, which is just paper, pencil, PEX is typically considered kind of a no tech option, or sign language. And just know that you don't have to pick just one. It can be a mix. I mean, I don't use just one form of communication. So to say that they have to is also ableist, and it's a little bit of of not not equitable, that's for sure, right? So you can say, well, in this situation they're going to use this. Like I have a kid that can use speech for certain things, but when it gets to this, they have to use AAC, right? They have to, but some of them they have pictures around different places in their house because they can't quite get it on their device because they can't remember to locate those, or they don't keep with their device. They tend to run around the house, specifically at home. They don't carry it around with them at home. And so they can go grab a picture from this thing, go over and hand it to mom, whatever, as opposed to having to go hunt for their device when they need it. But I'll tell you that whenever they really, really, really need something that they don't have at home, or they want to actually talk about something, they still go back to that device, which I think is phenomenal and wonderful. All right, so different types of AAC, right? There's different technology types. We've talked about what that looks like. I try not to focus on whether it's picture exchange or whether it's device necessarily, because again, that's all just articulation. It is the way in which we're presenting the symbol. So when you make a choice, know that you're choosing the articulation method and approach. You're choosing the symbol that should go with that. They should go with whatever the MO is. And you also have to talk about what is the MO itself. Those are three different pieces and three different decisions you have to make. It's not all just one. This is the example when I said about sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't even know I didn't know. That's a lot to think about. That's also whenever I find people like we're struggling, it's not working out. It's because like, oh, well, you focused on one of those. You strategically picked one, but there's three other components you have to think about to make that decision. What's the MO? And what is that really talking about? And we're going to talk about more here in just a second. What is the symbol that should go with that MO? And then what's the articulation method that would best suit that for this child? Sometimes it's the same one. Sometimes it's different. Here's another thing that it's a hot topic that might come up. It's talking about motor planning. We all use motor planning to our advantage. Motor planning is the fact that I don't have to look at something, but my body can perform the movement because I know it, right? Now, do we have to have motor planning to be successful? No, you do not have to have motor planning. Picture exchange is a perfect example of you can use picture exchange on the typical PEX, like a PEX board sort of setup, and they can be extremely successful. However, notate to yourself that they are relying extremely heavily on visual scanning and the ability to visually scan. And you have to constantly be visually scanning in order to have an idea and be able to handle this and be able to do it. If you took a picture exchange and you made it a constant location, the pictures do not change, well, that would essentially turn it into like an emoji keyboard or like your typewriter keyboard. So being able to have that consistent means that I won't have to put so much effort into visually scanning all the time. And I just go to where it's at. My people who use motor plan based platforms, whether that is LAMP or LAMP's really the main one, there's a couple others, but one of the main ones is that they can type on that sometimes like they would be typing on a keyboard. I can't tell you how many of my kids, what they get frustrated with is if they're already hitting exactly where that button would be, they go looking at me, keeping this social engagement. We want to talk about being able to be social and the difficulty that happens whenever you're having to hunt through pages or you don't know where it's at, you got to visually scan all the time. You're not going to have a lot of social and eye contact and those pieces because they're going to have to be so visually focused on that. But I have kids that can, out of the corner of their eye, they will hit that motor plan. And what they get frustrated with is if the screen didn't move as fast as they did. If anything, they have to monitor is just making sure they hit it, the screen changed, and then they hit the other one. But they're able to do that more quickly. They're not having to think about or look through or scan through because of what motor planning is. So there's a debate back and forth about whether you need it or you don't need it. You don't have to have it, but just like with us, if you moved the letters on the keyboard every day or every couple days or whatever, or every time you added a new word, this is where I don't like some of the things that Protocol will do, is that it will bump things down and move them. Like, then that just means that I'm going to have to go and relearn it every time that happens. So for me, while it's not mandatory, know that you're relying heavily on visual, um, and you don't have to be. Motor planning just allows it to be faster in the overall long run, like we do for anything else. Anything else that we do consistently or habitually, we've used motor planning. It's part of how our body naturally learns and builds in. So you don't have to, but know that it would be beneficial. I've created a picture exchange board that is motor planning based. It always has certain things in the exact same places, so that way they can learn exactly where they are. So some kids who have minimal to poor, like 3-second visual scanning, so they could never do it, are now able to use the picture exchange board because it's always in the same place. They don't have to visually scan. I do that a lot with I've worked with deaf, blind, quadriplegic, that demographic. We have to use those pieces. Another big debate that comes from core versus fringe. So one of the things I want to make sure that everybody knows, and again, this is so pre-symbolic communication. I want to go back and say that even speech therapists, a lot of them don't know about it. They may have like a general idea of like, oh, it's gestures, whatever, but know that it's a whole way of developing communication and language because most of their training is on speech and language. That's where the bulk of the training begins. There's not nearly as much from my experience and what I've heard from people who are professors and kids, students going through the programs on the pre-symbolic building of communication and interactions and those social skills and that triadic gaze and all those different interactions. So a lot of speech therapists won't know that either. So be prepared for that, right? Same thing kind of goes with core and fringe. If you don't know, fringe is considered typically those nouns, very specific words, which ABA is known for really honing in on very, very, very specific vocabulary words that they're going to use. And so the other side of that would then be core, which speech therapists are notorious for jumping all on core, like everything needs to be core. And that was based on looking at preschoolers who are beginning to learn language, 3 to 5, I believe was the age range. And what are the words that they use the most? The idea being that if you use these words that they use the most, then you're going to capture a whole lot more. They're going to be able to say a whole lot more things. Things like eat or drink or they or their. So they're usually very flexible words that don't have an exact concrete match. You wouldn't be able to have a photo necessarily and go, oh, that I exactly know what that is necessarily. And so the idea being that makes up about 60 to 80% of what adult communicators use. Like, oh, if you can learn these top, 50, 100 words, well, that's going to make up the bulk of what you need to say. Here's the problem with that, though, with both sides of this discussion, is that that's not how kids learn. Some, in ABA, we kind of have this idea that kids learn these specific nouns first. Well, then speech is like, oh, but yeah, but if we did this, this would be better for them. Well, the truth is, the research on your first 10 words is typically a toss-up of the two. You've got between 40 to 60% of nouns versus fringe. That's generally how it falls out. And it depends on the kid. It depends on where they're at and what they're doing, what their motivators are, right? What is the thing that's really motivating to them? What's their culture, right? Cow was the fairly early one for me because we grew up on an Angus farm, whereas fish is a very common one for people who are in more water-based cultures and in areas where crab might be for somewhere else. If you eat a lot of that, right? So in all of those aspects there is no right or wrong answer here as far as it is all one or all the other. Know that it is somewhere in the middle, and we all use a variety of that. In addition to when we talk about fringe specifically, or core also, what I call idiosyncratic core. This is the one, it's you. Like what I use, when you talk about the words I use all the time, it's going to be different for me than it's going to be for somebody else. So again, somebody who has some language, who has a lot of, like I'm working at it with a stroke or ALS patient, I'm probably going to use more core because they've already had that developed language. If I'm working on a kid who has minimal to no language, I'm looking at, well, what is the first 10 to 20-ish vocabulary words? And that is pretty strictly based on MO and how do I get that MO delivered? So for those foundational communicators, that is what they're looking at, right? Is what is that key beginning? Our second word is fringe. Fringe, that is your second word. I know I have 15 minutes left. I'm notorious probably for trying to pack in so much. I talk really, really fast and I try to give people as much information as I can because I'm like, oh, I need you to have this. So again, these are the components that I think need to make up your AAC philosophy, things that you need to have an idea about and make a decision about, right? So this is our last piece. We're going to do this last slide and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Um, I worked really hard to make sure I left some time for that this time. So we really have to talk about, as we're talking about that difference between there's, the MO, understanding what the MO is, giving it a symbol, a symbolic match and meaning, and then determining the articulation method. What is the best way to articulate that? Again, truly being speech, physical picture symbol, dynamic display device, sign language, gestures, right? Whatever. Some of the things that are just easier just to gesture it. We have to be able to make sure that those are clear. So you want to look at it. What I want to make sure we're talking about is what is the SD for AMAND? AMAND, if you're not a BCBA, AMAND is a request for a desired item, right? Or an MO, motivation. So what is the motivation for requesting something versus attacked, right? And we're looking at either one of those. It is your internal motivation, 100%. It is what is the internal state, the thing that's happening inside of you. That should be the SD. And what I see a lot is we don't always do a great job of making sure that the symbol that we provide them truly matches the SD, which is MO, the motivator, right? Um, so I'll see a lot of things like this. Is one that happens a lot is Cheetos, right? They have a symbol for Cheetos. The kid asked for Cheetos. Like, okay, great. They're like, yeah, but he's doing this, but he's not using it consistently. And it kind of like right around, we offer him Cheetos, but then he picks cookies or whatever else, right? He picks other things. So we're not getting consistency in our symbol responding. I'm like, okay, so let me ask you this. If he asked for Cheetos and you gave him a cookie, would he be upset? They're like, no. No, he wouldn't. I go, well, then his MO wasn't Cheetos. Oh, let's try a different one. What if you gave him, he asked for cookies and, or he asked for Cheeto and you gave him a carrot, like something like, okay, that's a little healthier. Maybe he wouldn't. It's similar in color, at least whatever. They're like, would he be upset? Like, no, honestly, he'll just take whatever you give him. Okay. Then my question is, what's the MO here? Does he like Cheetos? Would he prefer Cheetos over carrots? Probably. Who wouldn't? Well, some people wouldn't. I'm not friends with them. I would. I would love Cheetos over a carrot, right? But that doesn't mean the MO in that moment was for Cheetos. If I would give you something, if you man for something, I give you something else, and you are like, sure, fine, then chances are the MO was to eat. That's whenever things like core kind of fit in. It's not that I'm like, oh yeah, you need to teach core, but I'm like, but you need to make sure that your symbol matches the MO. That's what I need it to do. Same thing if they say, oh, they always ask for this toy, whatever the toy is. And you give it to them, and then they're frustrated. All right, well maybe that's not the right toy. But like, or if you give them any toy, and they'll be fine. Like then maybe the MO wasn't for truck or for putty or for bubbles. It was for play. I just want to play. I want to have a nice time. I want to enjoy myself. Right. So being clear about what is the true MO here. I had one a couple weeks ago that they were going through and they were manning for one thing. They were manned for couch, then manned for music. They were manned for couch, and they keep going back and forth and manning for couch, and then they man for music, and then they do this and then this, then they man for the next thing. Like they're not being clear. I go, well, what are they wanting to do? Like, well, they want to go play on that. They want music and the couch. They want to listen to music on the couch. I go, okay, then the MO that we're missing here is the word and, which is pretty advanced, honestly. They're wanting and I want this and I want that. I want both of those things. So this kid within a week picked up the word and because he's like, oh, I can get two reinforcers at the same time. Absolutely, because that's what he actually wanted. That was what was key to him, right? So why I would not normally go to and as the first thing I would teach. In fact, that'd be quite a ways down the road typically. His MO that was there as somebody who just started, by the way, he just started AAC a month ago. and we're just getting initial pieces, his MO is strong for two things at one time. And so he picked up and liked that. It's not because I think core should be taught. It's not because that was even in developmentally appropriate. It's because that's where the MO is. So I want to make sure that as we're talking about, these talked about these different pieces, we've talked about the topography and the articulation. We've talked about the choosing the modality, right? And we now talk about the choosing the symbol and the MO and how that fits in between there. Make sure that we really are analyzing what is the MO here. If they wouldn't have been upset because they got something different, then chances are that wasn't really the MO. Now, I do want to give one caveat to that is that sometimes if they've been in services for a while, if they're a little older, the younger ones, it's not doesn't happen as much. They've been taught just to accept whatever they're given, to tolerate it. So that can be a bit of a problem. And so be looking for that in your kids who have been in services for a while. They may have been taught that may have been taught out of them. And so one of the things I look at specifically for pre-symbolic communication, but I always make sure is like, do they have a strong refusal repertoire? Every kid should refuse. They should have preferences. If they don't have preferences of this over that, then that's another issue that we're going to have to address. You need to be able to say no to something. Also, if we have kids that are kind of all the same MOs, they kind of have the same motivators, they're fickle, I guess. They're kind of like, oh, whatever, I like everything. That's a whole different situation. Francesca Espinoza has really great stuff on building MOs, but you can actually build an MO. Having the ability to refuse things helps build an MO. When you can't refuse, you don't feel like you can refuse. You're kind of like, what good does it do me? I'll take whatever I can get. But the act of choosing, working a little harder to do that actually will increase the value of those things. And you'll start to get differentiation in the things that they're motivated for versus things that they're not. So those are some pieces that you do need to take into consideration as we're looking at that. All right. We have gone through a bunch of pieces. I know I've packed a whole lot in here. I'm told a lot of talking with me is like taking a drink from a fire hose. Yeah, I get that. And I hope that this has provided you with, again, it won't give you the answers, but it'll give you information of what you need to think about and what you need to be doing. So give me a yes if you're like, yes, I know what I didn't know, or at least what I need to look into. I don't have the answer for you because there isn't one. You have to choose for yourself, like politics, like religion. Like, I mean, the Bible all says it's the same Bible, but we all come from different aspects because we have our different beliefs. I need you to know to think about these things, to be looking into these things, because this is going to make you a better able decision maker, right? Again, there's way more training and way more to go into this, but at least this gets you headed down the right path. Beautiful. Yes, yes, yes. Good. I'm so glad. All right. With our last little bit of time, I will open it up to a Q&A, to questions.
Can you see the Q&A or would you like me to read them?
Would you read them, please? That would be very helpful.
Yes. So the first one is, how can we introduce texting on a phone to a nonverbal teenager to use as another form of communication?
Um, so again, like you see, there's a lot of things that go into this. There's a lot of questions to ask here to whether that's the right one, that's the right choice. What is it? Is it, are they socially motivated? Do they already have a whole bunch of vocabulary that they understand vocally? And if they have all the vocabulary, well, that's all right. We're just going to teach you the one-to-one correspondence to type, or at least to be able to word match, to be able to type out the beginnings of it and use predictive texting to grab the word. But again, that's a big difference between a has we're a fundamental communicator. Like I said, when I talk about the AAC profiles that I've kind of built, is what that looks like. A foundational communicator, even if they're receptively fairly decent, if they're not expressively, because those are two different tracks in the brain, they don't have that skill set. Like me, I can understand a lot more Spanish now than I can speak. So it's so making sure that that's a consideration. But otherwise, it's that one-to-one matching for predictive text, using words, pretty standard. So unfortunately, there's a lot more that goes into that.
That's okay. All right, the next question is, should we push an alternative method if their attempts are not globally understood? For example, they have ASL approximations that familiar adults can understand, but new teachers and aides cannot.
Yeah, so I would say one of our tenets is social significance, right? If that communication is not socially significant, if that's not going to allow them to contact reinforcement, then I would question whether we did. Like I can, sure. if you tell me some version of Spanish that it's like, oh yeah, I mean it's close, but I go down to Mexico and I mumble and garble all the time. I can't speak with my spouse or in-laws. Did you teach me anything? Not, and that's not to be offensive. We may have done it with the intent of, but truth is, you can either choose to confine them to that world of just the few people that understand and can be trained on that. You have also increased the likelihood of the burden that's going to require for them to be successful in any environment, because that we're going to have to train a specialized person no matter what. They could have all the communication in the world. They could be perfectly good communicators, but if they can't get their point across to a novel person, then you will have forever trapped them in a small world. I don't say that to be harsh, but it's the truth.
Next one is, what are your recommendations for adapting AAC for GLP learners and their scripts?
Um, I think the GLP conversation is a whole other thing as far as what that looks like. Um, I would say I don't have a lot of clarity. I'm currently trying to get in contact with some what people call GLP learners, or people who are consider themselves to be masters in it, to have a better understanding of the things that from what I understand that I described with GLP, to me just look like natural language, like the way kids learn. And so I'm unclear about how, yeah, I still have questions about GLP to be able to answer that really good recommendation. Sorry.
That's okay. I do see everybody's questions about CEUs. I will get to that just in a few minutes. I want to give Braxton a little bit more time to answer some of these questions in the Q&A, excuse me. Just stay on for a little bit after the webinar ends, and I will be happy to support. Okay, next question for you, Braxton, is for someone who is wanting to introduce an AAC for a kiddo who has no language, there is a strong MO for eating snacks. Should they first teach eat or a specific food item?
So this will go back to that question of is the MO eat, or is the MO a specific food item? If you have to kind of navigate that. If it's I so if it's that if they don't care what you give them as long as they give them food, the MO is eat. It's not food. And so oh, who is it that talks about omnibus mans? I'm blanking on his name. Iwata, I think, talked about the omnibus man, right? Like my way, essentially, right? Going, it's similar to that, that we're having this generalized man going, hey, I just want to eat, right? I don't really care what you give me. I just want to eat. So you just have to be really clear as what that is and what that looks like. So to make sure you're giving them the right one. And know that sometimes it could be desserts. Like I had one kid who was like, it's not just eat, because if you try to give them any of these other things which they like, they're like, no, I want a dessert right now. I'm wanting sugar. Now we have to deal with the saying no to that, whatever. But that was much more clear. If it was a cookie, if it was a M&M, it didn't really matter as long as it was a sweet thing or sweets, that sort of thing. So just make sure if you're really clear about what that MO is. Not always easy, but that's how you're going to make that decision.
All right. If a younger learner has been reliably using PECs, such as like flipping through the binder, and has recently acquired an AAC device, what are some suggestions for assisting with the transition? Would you keep training both forms of communication or switch over to AAC fully?
Hmm. So, so one thing is, I would tell you that even if you just stayed with PEC or Picture Exchange, if you've got those things to stay in the same place, minimum saying like this page is all about activities, this page is all about food, that's going to help because it's pushing towards that motor plan aspect. Especially if you it's like all my kids, they are still on Picture Exchange, their binders have um, pictures inside of that so that way you know where to return the picture to, and so it stays in the same place and just makes it easier. They are far faster and more fluent in their use. Trying to make that switch over, I I what I would question is whether or not they're being successful at going to a device. I am not a proponent of hobbling. That's a very country term. It's slowing them down, right? Limiting their ability to acquire language and communication just because we want to teach a different modality, different topography. That's exactly why I don't have any sort of a wait time. If my kid is working on speech, I don't wait until they prove to me that they're not going to do it before I start doing AAC. I'm like, hey, we're going to do both of these at the same time because I'm not going to slow down your language development just because your topography and speech isn't working very well. So I would say the same thing here. They're like, they are rocking it with the pictures and they're not seeing that same transition over here. But if it's like every time I give you a new vocabulary word or whatever else, yep, you pick it up on the device just as easy as you did on with the picture exchange, or at least close to, then I'm like, okay, then let's just build it on the device. There's no sense in doing it over here. But if we're like, wow, it's for whatever reason, the device just isn't coming along like the pictures are, you're picking those up way faster still. I'm not going to hold your language back because we're trying to transition to a new topography. And again, that's kind of what that looks like, just as it would from choosing to use AAC whenever their speech isn't coming along.
Right. We do have several more questions. Unfortunately, we are at time today. We will take note of everybody's questions that have posted them in the Q&A, and we'll send them off to Braxton to answer a couple. We will be posting them on our social media platforms with those responses. So thank you, Braxton, for a very engaging conversation about AACs, and thank you everybody for attending. Again, I will be staying on for a few minutes after this so that I can answer any CEU questions you might have. But Braxton, thank you again so much. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but I look forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Have a good rest of the week.